Hey guys, tonight we dive deep. Literally. The moon is high, the waves are still, and somewhere between legend and lullaby, a strange woman floats ashore, completely silent. The sand sticks to her sea-wet hair, her pale hands shimmer faintly under the starlight, and when the fishermen touch her, it's like brushing against something not quite human. You can feel the mystery tingling already, can't you? You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking along the shore in a city that smells of jasmine, salt, and spice. This is Basra, back when it buzzed with scholars, traders, and a rather inconvenient number of court intrigues. One morning, a group of fishermen haul in their nets and discover something quite different from tuna or treasure. A woman, not floating face down in tragedy like so many stories begin, but floating as if asleep. Calm and unafraid, her skin pale as pearl, and her robe woven from some fabric that doesn't seem entirely woven. The fishermen whisper among themselves. Is she cursed, blessed, lost? They bring her to the palace, because that's what you do when something smells of magic. You pass it straight to royalty. The king, a fair if slightly bored man, is stunned. She's beautiful. Yes, but there's a stillness about her that seems deeper than sleep. She doesn't speak, not a single word, not for days. She accepts food with a nod. She walks the palace gardens in silence. She watches, listens, never answers. It unnerves the nobles. It fascinates the king. Some think she's a foreign princess under a spell. Others mutter she's a jinnia, and that one day she'll open her mouth and breathe fire. Historians still argue whether this Julnar figure was rooted in older Mesopotamian myths of water spirits, or invented entirely by a 9th century storyteller with a fondness for dramatic women. But what is certain? Everyone in the court starts behaving differently. The ladies of the harem wear softer colors. Musicians begin composing lullabies that mimic the rhythms of the tide. Even the royal chef starts sneaking seaweed into everything, convinced it might please her. One day, a physician tries to test her muteness. He pricks her finger. She doesn't flinch. He offers rare fruits, spicy perfumes, a mirror, nothing. Finally, he whispers in her ear a line from an old sea legend. The daughter of coral shall return with the tide. Her eyes flicker. That night, the moon is full. The king, standing on his balcony, finds her there as well, staring at the sea. He speaks to her again, gently, the way you speak to someone who is nearly drowned. You need not tell me anything, he says, but if you wish to stay, stay. And for the first time, she smiles. Now here's a fun little sidebar. In some versions of the tale, this king's name is Shama, while in others, he's unnamed altogether. A few manuscripts even suggest he might be related to Shahryar, the original husband in the larger 1001 Nights frame story. The scribes were clearly winging it a bit. Weeks pass. Julnar's silence becomes its own kind of speech. Her grace, her stillness, the way her bare feet avoid stepping on beetles or bruising flower petals, all of it begins to change the palace. One scribe writes, "She is like rain falling on locked stone, quiet, but slowly everything opens." Of course, not everyone is thrilled. The vizier begins to mutter about enchantments. A court astrologer swears she arrived under an eclipse, but no one can deny she has done nothing. Nothing except exist. And somehow, that's more powerful than any royal decree. Until one night, the king visits her chambers, leaving the guards with nervous glances. Inside, the moonlight floods the room. She is sitting by the fountain, her fingers tracing lazy spirals in the water. And then, softly, she speaks. "My name is Julnar. That's it. That's all. But it hits like thunder. The next morning, the entire palace is whispering. She spoke. She has a name. What else might she say?" One courtier faints just from hearing her laugh. And just like that, the story's heartbeat begins to quicken. Because when silent women finally speak in stories like these, things start to change. New stories ripple outward. New questions bubble up. And the sea, well, it's never done talking, is it? The day after she speaks her name, Julnar becomes not just a palace mystery, but a court obsession. Her voice, it turns out, is as strange and beautiful as her silence had been. It's soft, a little echoey, like someone speaking from inside a deep well, or maybe from underwater. You can hear it now, can't you? That dreamy sing-song tone that makes everything else in the room go quiet. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, people hang on every word. She talks of stars that shine beneath the sea, of gardens that bloom in salt water, and of beasts the size of houses that sing to each other through the currents. She never names her homeland, only says it is beneath where men may go. Historians still argue whether Julnar's descriptions came from ancient pearl-diving folklore or were a poetic metaphor for unreachable female knowledge. Fringe scholars even speculate she might represent an oral retelling of prehistoric matriarchal sea cults. But honestly, even if she were just really good at making stuff up, it works. The king, he's in deep. He starts walking with her in the garden every evening, though she says little. He places a seat for her beside the throne, though she never uses it. And then one night, on the roof of the palace, under stars so bright they make your teeth ache, he confesses his love. She doesn't say yes, she doesn't say no. She simply places one cool hand on his. And then they marry. No grand parade, no 3-week festival, just a quiet ceremony inside the palace mosque, with only a few witnesses and an old cleric who mispronounces her name. Julnar corrects him politely. And for the first time ever, everyone laughs. You'd expect scandal. You'd expect fury. But oddly enough, the nobles are mostly relieved. It makes sense, they say. She's clearly special. Perhaps she'll bring magic to the kingdom, or at least calm the king's occasional bad moods. Julnar adjusts easily to palace life. She learns the customs. She bows to elders. She asks no special treatment, except that her bathwater always be poured from silver jugs. Never copper. No one knows why, but no one questions it. She becomes somehow beloved, and then, as if the sea itself had been waiting, she begins to swell with child. Now, you'd think the court would erupt in excitement, and it does, to a point. But there's also fear. What will this child be? Human? Half-human? Will it breathe air or water? A royal nurse jokes that they'll need to keep a fishbowl handy, just in case. Meanwhile, Julnar begins speaking more often, but only to the king. They share long conversations behind closed doors. She tells him stories from her youth, how she grew up in a palace made of coral, how her mother's voice could calm whales, how pearls were used as currency and squid were sent as messengers. Modern marine biologists have taken great interest in this section of the tale. By the way, some even compare it to early Pacific Islander myths or coastal Arabic poetry, trying to trace if Julnar's kingdom was metaphor, memory, or misremembered biology. But like everything else in her story, truth remains slippery. Julnar never reveals how or why she came to shore that day. She only says, "I was sent. Sent by whom? For what?" She never says. She just places her hand on her growing belly, and the king chooses not to press. One fringe theory suggests Julnar might have been a political envoy from a sea people kingdom, seeking alliance. Another proposes that she was exiled for some transgression, and that her child is meant to reclaim something lost. But again, just theories. Now, remember how the palace had been drifting into sleepy wonder since she arrived? The pregnancy turns everything up a notch. People begin wearing ocean colors. Poets compare her glow to moonlight on water. The palace musicians compose an entire lullaby suite titled Badr al-Bahr, Full Moon of the Sea. You'll want to remember that name. One day, the king notices something odd. Julnar's eyes, they were always bright. But now, sometimes, when she's near water, they shimmer like actual pools, like the sea itself is looking out through her. And one evening, she says quietly, when he comes, the ocean will call. He doesn't know what that means. Neither do we. But the palace begins preparing for a child that might not belong to just one world. There's one quirky historical detail here that scholars love pointing out. During the Abbasid period, when 1001 Nights' Tales were passed around most fervently, midwives were expected to know both medicinal herbs and protective charms. So when Julnar finally goes into labor, the midwife arrives carrying not only towels and oils, but a pouch of salt, a bronze mirror, and a small dried seahorse. The birth is quiet, no thunderclaps, no glowing lights, just a single cry, soft and almost melodic. A boy, perfectly formed, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a mark on his shoulder shaped like a crescent wave, and eyes so pale they seem filled with fog. They name him Badr. It means full moon, a name meant to shine both on land and underwater. And as Julnar cradles her son for the first time, the fountains in the palace ripple. Even though there's no wind, Badr grows quickly, almost too quickly. By the time he's 2, he speaks in full sentences. By 3, he's asking questions most scholars would politely dodge. And by 4, he's already begun to spend hours sitting quietly by the palace fountains, as if listening to something no one else can hear. You try not to read too much into that. Kids are weird, but with Badr, it's different. His skin is warm like any child's, but when he's near water, you swear it cools just a touch. His eyes? Misty, silver blue, always scanning, always shifting. And when he sleeps, his lashes twitch like he's dreaming not of flying, but of swimming fast, deep, far. The king adores him. Of course he does. But he also can't help noticing that his son's moods shift with the tides. When the moon is full, Badr is joyful, bounding through the halls like a song. When it wanes, he becomes pensive, quiet, distant. Julnar watches this with a strange calm, as if none of it surprises her. Eventually, the king asks her, "What is he? Human? Something more?" Julnar replies with a faint smile. "He is born of both worlds. He will choose." Now that raises some eyebrows. Historians still argue whether this line hints at dual spiritual lineage, man and jinn, or a literal amphibious ancestry. Some argue she meant choose, as in moral destiny. Others think she was being completely literal, and that Badr could physically relocate to an undersea kingdom like it's no big deal. Either way, it's a loaded phrase, and it sticks in the king's mind like a burr. At 7, Badr begins to have dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but vivid, elaborate, ocean-filled dreams. He wakes up speaking words he hasn't learned, in a tongue no one else understands, except Julnar, who simply nods. Sometimes he draws them. Great shell-domed cities. People with silver hair and translucent fins. Coral libraries. Moonlit whale processions. All with the clear, exacting detail of someone recalling, not imagining. One fringe scholar in the 1930s even claimed that Badr's descriptions matched the underwater topography of the Persian Gulf near modern-day Kuwait. A little far-fetched, perhaps, but fun for dinner party conversation. The court begins to notice. Whispers pick up again. Is he really a prince or a changeling? Is Julnar controlling him or protecting him? To distract from the gossip, the king begins giving Badr small responsibilities. He oversees the royal stables, then the kitchen staff. He listens to council meetings, where he offers surprisingly insightful thoughts for someone who still thinks figs are vegetables. But none of that holds his attention. Instead, he seeks out pools, ponds, wells, any body of water. He listens to them one afternoon while playing by a garden basin. Badr topples in. A servant dives after him in a panic, but finds the boy calmly sitting at the bottom, eyes wide open, completely still. Breathing, they pull him out, terrified, but he just laughs, shakes the water from his hair and asks, "Why were you afraid?" A royal physician examines him, finds nothing unusual, except perhaps lungs slightly more developed than expected. That night, the king doesn't sleep. Julnar comes to him quietly, as she always does when worry crowds his mind. She kneels beside him and places his hand over her heart. "You must trust him," she says. "The ocean does." Now here's a strange historical tidbit. In one rare version of the tale recorded in an Andalusian manuscript, Badr is said to have had webbed toes and fingernails made of mother-of-pearl. That version also claims he could speak with dolphins. Make of that what you will. Time moves. Badr is now 10. He begins hearing things no one else can hear, songs in the rain, voices in the splash of a thrown pail, names in the wind off the harbor. He doesn't fear them, but he doesn't fully understand them either. Julnar finally decides it's time. She takes him to the sea. The king doesn't argue, not anymore. He watches from the dunes as Julnar walks with Badr into the shallows. They speak. She cups water in her palms and lets it run down his head like a blessing. Then, she steps away. The water stirs. Something large moves just beneath the surface, too quick to see, too big to be a fish. Badr doesn't flinch. A face rises, pale, unfamiliar, sharp-cheeked, eyes glowing like salt lamps. It's a man, or close enough. He speaks in a choral language, one that seems to come from the water itself. Badr replies, slowly, then more fluently. Julnar watches them, silent, unblinking. The figure nods, then disappears beneath the surface. Badr turns back, smiling. "What did he say?" the king asks. "He said I'm expected." From that day on, Badr spends more time by the sea. He listens, he learns, and while he still smiles and plays and debates palace matters with dry wit, you can tell he's beginning to drift, not away from his family, but towards something else, some calling, some truth he was born to answer. By 12, Badr isn't just the sea-born prince. He's already halfway legend. Merchants passing through Basra whisper stories of the boy who swims with rays and speaks to fish. Poets across the region start composing verses like "The Pearl of Two Worlds" and "Between Tide and Throne," while court painters try, mostly unsuccessfully, to capture his ever-shifting sea glow in oils. Badr just rolls his eyes at the attention. He's still a kid, after all, but even he can feel something beginning to change. He doesn't just love the sea, he needs it. The older he gets, the more land starts to feel awkward, too hot, too dry. He sweats more than others, walks barefoot year-round, and prefers rooms with fountains or stone walls that hold moisture. When he bathes, he stays underwater for far too long, surfacing only when someone knocks 3 times, always 3. No one knows why. Julnar notices. Of course she does. And one day, while braiding his hair back from his eyes. She says gently, "When the tide pulls strongest, do not fear the leaving, but do not forget the shore." That's classic sea mom wisdom. By the way, calming and vaguely ominous. That same night, Badr dreams of a throne underwater, not gold, not jeweled, just sculpted coral, spiraling up like a nautilus shell, encircled by sea snakes and glowing eels. A soft melodic voice says, "Return." He wakes up gasping. Now here's where things take a turn. Not long after, a group of strangers arrives in Basra. They claim to be scholars from the East, but they ask too many questions. They linger by the fountains. One is seen sketching the moon pool where Badr plays. Another tries to sneak into the royal library at night. Julnar meets with the king in private. "They are not scholars," she says. "They are from the deep court." "The what now?" the king asks. Julnar closes her eyes. "My brother is a ruler there. He has finally noticed." Historians still argue whether the deep court refers to an actual underwater civilization or is just symbolic of hidden dynastic threats. Some even think it's a metaphor for internal family politics. But the point is, Badr is being watched, evaluated, maybe even lured. The king strengthens palace security, but Julnar shakes her head. "Locks do not stop the sea." She's right. One evening, Badr vanishes. No broken locks, no alarms, just gone. The palace erupts. The king scours the city, sends ships down the coast. Nothing. For 2 days. Grief thickens the air like smoke. On the third morning, a fisherman arrives, trembling. He says he saw something offshore, a light beneath the waves, and a boy riding a creature with silver fins, laughing, free. The king rides to the beach, finds only Julnar, standing knee-deep in the surf. "He's with them," she says softly. "He's safe. For now." And here's the fringe detail that's too odd not to mention. Some accounts describe the creature Badr rides as a seahorse the size of a camel. Others claim it was a shimmering water serpent with tiny bells around its neck. You can pick whichever visual keeps you up at night. For weeks, there's silence. The palace slows. Even the fountains seem quieter. Then, a letter arrives. Not on parchment, but etched on the inside of a giant clamshell, delivered to the harbor by a blind turtle. You heard that right. The message is from Julnar's brother, the Sea King. He invites Badr to his court to learn his bloodline and stand among equals. There is no threat, no demand, just a formal invitation and a test. Badr must find the pearl without price. It's a mythical relic, said to shimmer with all the colors of the sea. Some say it grants wisdom. Others claim it chooses kings. Of course, no one knows where it is, but Badr, when he returns, drenched and shivering, simply says, "I've accepted." The king objects, fiercely. But Julnar, calmly and heartbreakingly, says, he was always meant to do more than rule here. That night, Badr visits his father's chamber. They speak long into the dark. No one hears what is said, only that, at dawn, Badr walks into the sea. Not swims, walks, straight into the water, never looking back. His hair fans out behind him like seaweed. His shadow disappears beneath the foam. And this is where things get murky. For 3 months, there is no word. The king begins losing sleep. Julnar sits at the window every night, eyes fixed on the horizon. Then one morning, the waves part. Badr returns, changed, taller, eyes brighter, his voice deeper, echoing just slightly when he speaks. He carries something in his hand wrapped in kelp, a smooth, glowing pearl, not large but radiant, impossible to look away from. He has found it, and he has returned home, but the story's just getting started. Badr's return sets the palace ablaze. Not literally, thankfully, but in every other possible way. The kitchens double their fires. The musicians pull out instruments that haven't seen daylight in years. Even the old guards who usually just nap in sunny corners start polishing their armor again, just in case this marks the beginning of something historic. You watch from a shaded corridor as Badr enters, dripping seawater, glowing faintly in the torchlight. The kelp-wrapped pearl in his hand hums softly. Yes, hums. And though he says nothing at first, the atmosphere shifts. The king embraces him tightly, trying not to cry. Julnar. She doesn't move. She simply meets his eyes and whispers. "Did it change you?" Badr replies. "No, it reminded me." Now here's a curious fringe fact. One obscure manuscript claims that when Badr returns from the sea, flowers bloom along the shoreline he steps on, underwater flowers. Scientists today gently point out that's not how marine botany works. But let's be honest, it's too pretty to debunk. Soon, questions pour in. Where was he? What is the pearl without price? And why, exactly, does he now speak 2 seconds before everyone else, as if he already knows what's coming? He doesn't answer much. But he does request something unexpected. To study with the royal historians. Yep, the boy who just visited an underwater kingdom wants to sit in dusty rooms and read scrolls. Relatable, he spends weeks buried in archives, looking for patterns, ancient prophecies, sea legends, tales of people born between worlds. He finds one, eventually. It speaks of a twin-blooded heir who will bridge land and sea, ending an age of silence. He reads it 10 times, then once more. Aloud, the scroll bursts into flames. So, that's promising? You'd think this would mark the beginning of peace talks or trade routes with the deep court, right? But no, things don't settle. In fact, they begin to stir. Reports of strange sightings trickle in, fishermen seeing shadowy shapes trailing their boats, ships rocked by unseen waves in calm weather, dolphins swimming in perfect formation near coastal lookouts. Creepy? Yes. Aggressive? Not yet, but everyone feels it. The build-up, like the hush before a storm. Julnar tells the king they are watching how he walks the line. And Badr? He's restless again. Not in the same dreamy way as before, but with intent, focus. He begins training, fencing in the mornings, swimming at night, and meditation at dawn. He also starts asking difficult questions. What makes a kingdom legitimate? How long before fear turns to aggression? Do I serve both kingdoms or belong to either? The king, wisely, lets him ask. Now here's where things get downright operatic. At a public banquet in honor of Badr's return, a new guest arrives. A tall, elegant woman dressed in robes that shimmer like abalone shell. She calls herself Sausan. No one saw her arrive. No horse, no guards, just there. Julnar goes pale the moment she sees her. "She's my cousin," she says. "She comes from the Eastern Reef Court." The what court now? Apparently, sea politics are messier than surface ones. The Deep Court isn't a single kingdom, but a patchwork of realms, reefs, trenches, currents, each with their own rulers. And some of them are not thrilled that Badr might someday unify sea and land. Sausan brings a message wrapped in civility. The reef courts demand a demonstration of loyalty. Badr must return, kneel before the Council of Tides, and bind himself to their laws. The king says absolutely not. Julnar says absolutely not. Badr says, "Let me decide." He spends that night pacing the shoreline barefoot, wind whipping his cloak, pearl glowing softly in his hand. He watches the tide come in, then retreat. Over and over. Historians still debate whether Badr's final decision came from duty, strategy, or love for his mother. But the next morning, he agrees to go, not to kneel, but to speak, to explain. He dives into the sea with Sausan at his side and disappears again, this time for 6 months. Now, While he's gone, let me share a strange little side note. During this time, Basran scholars began receiving messages, encoded dreams, really, containing instructions for building water clocks that only function at high tide. Some laughed it off, others built them. Oddly enough, they worked. Anyway, after half a year, Badr resurfaces, but not in Basra. Instead, he appears in a city hundreds of miles north, on a mountaintop, glowing with sea light, walking calmly into a council of desert kings. He bears a gift, a shell that echoes with voices from the deep, not threatening, not pleading, just speaking. He stands there and delivers a message no one's heard before. My kingdom has 2 thrones, my crown has 2 halves, and I will kneel to none, but I will listen to all. Mic, drop. The sea hears it, the land hears it, and everyone knows the age of division is coming to an end. But that doesn't mean peace has fully arrived. Not yet. You'd think that after glowing pearls, talking shells, and underwater council drama, things would finally calm down. But no. You're in a 1001 Nights tale. Just when you think you've reached the peaceful resolution, someone gets cursed, kidnapped, or turned into a talking fish, and wouldn't you know it, Badr's next adventure kicks off with exactly that, a talking fish. He's out one morning, wading along the rocky edge of the southern coast, when he sees it, a small silver fish caught in a tide pool, flapping pitifully in 3 inches of water. He bends down to pick it up, and it speaks, "Do not return to the reef court," which is quite a way to start your day. Now, Badr is used to strangeness. His mother literally bathes in moonlight. But this is new. He gently places the fish back into the sea, and it vanishes with a pop, like a bubble snapping. He rushes to Julnar, who goes stiff when she hears. "That wasn't a warning," she says. "It was a summons, turns out, in sea court code. An animal speaking in riddles means someone's calling in a royal favor. That someone? A deep-sea oracle known only as the mouth below. An ancient being who sees through salt, bone, and blood. You don't ignore her. Julnar warns Badr that no one visits the mouth below without offering a truth of their own in return. She knows all things, Julnar says, but she always wants one more. Historians still argue whether the mouth below is meant to represent ancient goddess figures like Tiamat, or simply an allegory for the unknowable ocean floor. Either way, she's terrifying and probably has too many eyes. But Badr doesn't flinch. He dives again. The world beneath is darker this time. Colder. Thicker. Teeming with silence. He swims for what feels like hours, following bioluminescent eels that dart ahead like nervous guides. Finally, he finds her. She isn't a single creature. She's a mass of coral, shells, teeth, and woven seaweed, shaped vaguely like a woman curled in sleep. And when she speaks, the water vibrates around him. You were not meant to choose. You were meant to break the choosing. He doesn't understand. Not yet. She tells him of the old order, how the sea courts feared the surface world's unpredictability, its violence. How, once, long ago, a prince much like him tried to unite both realms. And how he failed. Miserably, she adds. That prince, never mentioned again. Lost, forgotten, turned, possibly, into a sea cucumber. The records are murky, but Badr is different, and she offers him a test. Above, there waits a trap, set not for you, but for the bridge you represent. And with that, she dissolves into mist and silt. When Badr returns to land, the trap is already unfolding. A caravan of strangers has arrived in Basra, claiming to be ambassadors from a distant land, bearing gifts and friendship. But something feels off. Their eyes are too sharp, their smiles too wide. The king, older now, more cautious, invites them anyway. Bad move, That night, Badr is taken, drugged, bound, hidden in a cart, gone. Julnar, sensing the sea tug against her blood like a tide turning wrong, knows instantly. She calls out, not to the guards, not to the king, but to them, her people, her family. The sea, and the sea answers. A storm builds offshore. Fast, violent. The sky goes black in minutes. Rain lashes sideways. The earth shakes. One of the kidnappers tries to flee. A wall of water rises up, folds over him like a hand, and he is gone. Meanwhile, deep in a hidden cove, Badr wakes up, groggy, chained, furious. The men who captured him are not ordinary. They wear amulets shaped like broken compasses, symbols of an ancient surface cult that once declared war on those born of water. Their ancestors were sea hunters, tide trackers, believers in a dry world's supremacy. They want nothing more than to cut off Badr's ascent, to ensure the kingdoms never unite. But they made a mistake. They forgot who his mother is. As they argue about what to do next, the air shifts. The cave begins to hum. Water seeps from cracks in the walls, then pours, then crashes. Julnar arrives, not on foot, but through the water itself. She doesn't shout. She doesn't rage. She simply gestures, and the chains fall away. Badr stands, and the storm erupts. Historians love this bit. It's pure drama. Waves crashing through cliffs, lightning striking only where it's needed. A roar in the air that sounds suspiciously like a whale's mourning cry. The cult is washed away, literally and figuratively. But here's the part they often leave out. After the storm, Badr doesn't celebrate. He sits on the rocks, soaked and silent, staring at the moon. Why must peace cost so much? He asks. Julnar, sitting beside him, lays a hand on his... Because some things are too old to vanish without a fight. You sleep that night in the rhythm of waves and memory, the hush of storm aftermath hanging soft over your chest. And though your body lies still, your mind keeps drifting, out, farther, beneath the surface again. It's not just Badr's story anymore. It's something stranger, larger, because after the storm, everything changes. Basra doesn't recover overnight. The palace walls are damp, cracked at the edges. The market square, flooded and full of debris. But people talk. They whisper about the prince who vanished into the sea and came back on a tide. About the queen who walks barefoot across wet stone, leaving coral in her footsteps. You see, something broke that night. Not just chains or cliffs or curses, something deeper. The line between sea and land has been blurred, and while that brings awe and wonder, it also brings fear. Many begin to question the old stories. Others cling tighter than ever. The court fractures, not into war, not yet, but into uneasy quiet, watchful eyes, half-hidden hands resting on the hilts of metaphorical swords. And in the middle of it all, Badr, he walks differently now. Slower. Not from weakness, but from weight. The kind you carry in your heart when you've seen what lurks in silence. He smiles still, but not as often. And when he speaks, people listen with both ears and both doubts. Julnar doesn't push him. She only waits. But one night, he comes to her. They stand again by the same moonlit balcony from all those years ago, where he first asked her about the sea. "I saw it," he says. "I saw the mouth below." Julnar nods. "And did she see you?" "She saw what I might become," Badr replies. "But I'm not sure I liked it." That confession hangs heavy between them. The mouth below's warning still echoes in his dreams. You were not meant to choose. You were meant to break the choosing. Break the choosing. It sounds cryptic, like prophecy always does. But Badr's starting to understand. You see, until now, everything has been about choice. sea or land, silence or speech, old ways or new. But perhaps the real test is to live in the in-between, to refuse the divide altogether, not by deciding which world to serve, but by building a bridge no one thought could last. And that's terrifying. He starts to act differently. He meets with the tide-marked traders, the ones who move goods from port to port under quiet flags. He listens to desert shepherds whose goats sometimes birth two-headed kids under strange stars. He speaks to spice dreamers, shipwreck survivors, and storm-born children. He's gathering something. A coalition? A resistance? No, something softer. An idea. Meanwhile, far out in the sea, a new threat stirs. The Eel King, old rival to Julnar's realm, hears of the Surface Prince and his mother's tempest, and he does not approve. In his domain, the water is thick with rot. He rides in a chariot made of whale bones and eel hide, pulled by stingrays the size of rooftops. He believes deeply in hierarchy, in the purity of salt-line royalty. To him, Badr is an infection, a hybrid, a mistake. He sends spies, not fish or dolphins. Those are too loud, too obvious. He sends silence, shadowfish, creatures with no reflection, things that slither along tide pools and listen to dreams. They learn that Badr sleeps with a knife under his pillow now, that he wakes often, mumbling prophecy in his sleep, that he no longer fears drowning, and that, perhaps, is the worst of it. For the sea depends on fear. It thrives in respect, awe, terror. A prince who walks between water and air with no hesitation is dangerous. Back on land, Badr's father, now aged and often confused, begins speaking of old wars. He talks of dragon ships, of lost brothers, of curses that came with northern winds. He is slipping. One evening, the king holds a feast, a final attempt to unite his fraying court. Nobles gather, peacocks strut, and jeweled lanterns sway in the warm breeze. Badr arrives late. He wears a robe made from sea silk, blue and silver, shimmering like fish scales. No sword, no crown, just a quiet calm. When he steps into the hall, the music falters. He doesn't sit. Instead, he speaks. I know many of you don't trust me. You think I'm a storm in disguise, that I'll flood the city or summon demons with my voice. And you may be right. Gasps ripple through the crowd. But I will not be a prince of walls. I will not rule through fear or blood. I was born of both land and sea, and I belong to neither. Someone throws a goblet. It misses. He smiles anyway. I belong to the future. Outside, lightning glimmers on the horizon, not as threat, but as promise. And somewhere deep below, the mouth below stirs. She is smiling. Not many sleep well that night. But you do, because you understand something now. The scariest thing in a story is not the monster, or the curse, or even the prophecy. It's the silence before the choice. And Badr, he's breaking that silence. The city begins to change, though slowly, like the turning of a great, creaking tide mill. Not all at once, not evenly, not cleanly. Some streets welcome it. Some close their shutters tighter. But there is no stopping it. Not anymore. Badr has become a hinge, a keystone. And through him, the world is beginning to bend. It starts with small things. Sea silk appears in the marketplace, not smuggled in, but openly displayed, with price tags scrawled in both human coin and pearl weight. Some people scoff, others whisper, but enough buy, enough wear. And then others follow. Fishermen begin leaving strange offerings on their nets again, tiny wreaths made of eelgrass and coral, a superstition from before the first king's reign, when the sea was less enemy, more goddess. And in the palace gardens, the fountains begin to sing again. No one admits to hearing it at first, but you can feel it, can't you? Even now, as you drift between awareness and sleep, you hear the melody, It's not a song exactly, just motion, made soft and round and patient. Water passing over polished stone in patterns not taught by hand, but remembered by earth. The city's dreaming too, but with every shift comes resistance. A group of nobles forms the Salt Circle, an informal brotherhood dedicated to protecting Basra's purity. They wear white gloves and speak often of tradition. They host banquets where no seafood is served. They distribute pamphlets claiming that prolonged exposure to sea magic may cause infertility, madness, or a loss of moral compass. And they begin to follow Badr, not openly. That would be gauche. But always, 3 steps behind. They watch who he speaks with. They catalog his gifts. They hire dream interpreters to analyze his nightly murmurs. Some even sneak into the palace kitchens, searching for strange herbs or black market coral. But they never find what they're looking for. Because Badr's not hiding magic. He is the magic. You learn this one night when you follow him. Not with feet, but with breath. With that thin strand of dream sense that binds you to his pulse. You find yourself in the old dry docks, long since abandoned. The place smells of wet wood, oil, and old lightning. Badr kneels there beside a child, a girl, barefoot, salt-blind, her eyes pale as moonstone. She hums to herself, her fingers swirling water inside a cracked basin. Badr says nothing, just listens, and eventually she speaks. "I was born on a thunder wave," she tells him. "The sky split, the sand boiled. My mother walked out of the surf and laid me in a basket of fish bones. I've never been cold since." "Do you feel different from other children?" he asks. "No, I feel correct." That makes him laugh, not mockingly, but like someone reminded of an answer they'd once forgotten. He gives her a shell, polished with his thumb. Not magical, just beautiful. "You'll need this," he says. Then he rises and walks away. You trail him through the city's spine, past weeping lanterns, past guards pretending not to recognize him, past lovers sleeping on rooftops and widows whispering to urns, and then through a door you've never seen, down a stair that wasn't there before, to a room where 12 others wait. Not nobles, not warriors, not even scholars, just people. An old woman with storm scars on her neck, a man with webbing between his fingers, a silent child who dreams in languages no book records, a merchant whose shadow sometimes swims separately from his feet. They sit in a circle, not facing Badr but each other. There are no titles, no introductions. They speak of weather patterns, of salt in stone, of dreams repeating across households. They pass around a bowl filled with water and ink, and each of them adds a drop of their own memory. Not blood, memory. When it comes to Badr, he adds nothing. He only dips 2 fingers in and draws a symbol on the stone floor. It looks like a wave wrapped around a star. You don't know what it means, but you will. Time stirs again. You're in the palace library now. Or rather, a memory of it. A place where the books breathe when no one's looking. A young scribe, barely 16, is sketching something with furious ink. It's a map, not of land, not of sea, but of edges, where one ends and the other whispers. The scribe doesn't see you, but he hums the same tune the fountains hum. It's spreading, this change, through music, through motion, through shared glances and uncertain prayers. And with it comes awakening. Because the mouth below, she's not content to wait. From the trenches of the deep, those blackest caverns where light forgets to shine, she sends her emissaries. They don't wear armor. They wear faces. Faces borrowed from memory, from guilt, from fear. They knock on doors, asking riddles no one dares to answer. They murmur to infants. They visit the dreams of priests and whisper truths that curdle faith like sour milk. They don't attack. They invite. But the invitations are traps. One scholar, seduced by a promise of knowledge, leaps into the river and is never seen again. Though later, books begin appearing in his handwriting, inked in salt on driftwood. A judge vanishes during a trial. Her robes are found folded on the roof, with tiny barnacles growing along the hem. Something is coming. And still, Badr does not flinch. He walks the edge daily now, sometimes with Julnar beside him, sometimes alone. He speaks to wind. He listens to soil. He whispers to the tides. And at night, in his chamber, he sketches a new city on parchment soaked in seawater and moonlight. Not Basra, not the Coral Palace, something else. A city that has never existed, except in dreams. But it's coming. You feel it now, don't you? You're part of it. You've always been, because the boundary is breaking. And all you need to do, is keep listening. You awaken. Not all at once, but gently, as if your thoughts were unfurling like kelp in shallow water. The dream has not left you. It lingers, threaded through your ribs like the tide through pier slats. You are neither in the sea nor fully ashore. You are in between. That strange, sacred middle, just like Badr. Tonight, he walks without lanterns. He carries only a shard of mirror tucked into his sleeve and a satchel of bone-white pebbles. The city does not sleep around him. It pretends to sleep, but it watches. Windows crack, rugs twitch, birds do not sing. And still, he walks. Julnar does not follow him. She waits instead at the whispering gate, where the wall between the known and unknown wears thin from centuries of yearning. Her tail coils like smoke. Her eyes flicker with the dull gleam of distant storms. She is no longer only flesh. You've seen it happen slowly, her transformation mirroring Badr's, but sharper, stranger. There is fur where there was scale, and scale where there was once skin. They are becoming something new. Together, at the center of the city, a great square opens. Normally it teems with fishmongers and spice hawkers, but now it's empty, swept clean by no hand, lit by no torch. In the center, a circle of salt surrounds a single black stone. Badr steps into the circle, and the stone breathes. You see it. You feel it. You know it's not stone at all, but something older, something compressed by time and worship and memory into a single, solid thought. It thrums with knowledge that predates language. Badr kneels, not to worship, to listen. And in that moment, the world inhales. It's not dramatic. It's not violent. It's slow, like the turning of a massive key in a long-forgotten door. The clouds bend. The wells shiver. The trees along the old roads crack open and weep golden sap. And then, a voice. Not loud, not deep, just precise. Like the point of a knife against skin. Will you open the gate? Badr does not answer with words. He reaches into his satchel and pours the white stones onto the ground. They roll, guided not by slope but by purpose. They form a shape, a spiral, lined with tiny runes not etched by any human hand. The stone hums again. The air folds, and for a breathless heartbeat, you see the other side, not fully, not clearly, but enough, a city beneath the waves. Its buildings curve like shells and bloom like anemones. Lanterns flicker with bioluminescence. Roads twist upward and inward and through things. And in the distance, on a throne of bone coral and broken ships, sits the mouth below. Her face is not monstrous. It's familiar. You've seen her features in paintings of lost queens, in the eyes of grieving mothers, in mirrors that forget to reflect. She looks at Badr, she looks at you, and she speaks again. You are the bridge, and the vision snaps shut like a closing book. You gasp. You aren't sure whether the air in your lungs belongs to you or Badr anymore. The square is silent. The salt circle has vanished. Only the stone remains, and the pattern of pebbles, still perfect, still pulsing. Badr rises and walks back toward the palace, his shadow now moving just a little slower than his feet. Like it's thinking. Inside the palace, you see changes too. The windows no longer reflect sunlight quite the same way. Sometimes, they show other places, places from dreams, from fears. from futures not yet chosen. The palace staff grows quieter. They speak in low voices and walk with bare feet, no longer out of custom, but reverence. In the garden, the lemon trees have begun to fruit small, glowing orbs that hum when touched. And in the library, new books appear nightly, blank when opened, but slowly filling with whatever the reader most needs to remember. Not everyone accepts it. Some servants flee, others burn sage and hang iron charms around their necks. But most stay because something about it feels right. Not safe, not easy, but true. One night, Julnar visits a child born during a thunderstorm. The same girl from the dry docks. Now she glows faintly at night. Her teeth are small and sharp. Her dreams cause the tides to change direction. Julnar gives her a name that cannot be spoken aloud without tasting salt. The girl laughs, and the streetlight above her blinks twice in approval. Elsewhere, the salt circle begins to fracture. One of their leaders, Lord Heron, is found standing knee-deep in the bay, whispering apologies to the waves. When they pull him out, he's weeping and swears he saw the ghost of his daughter brushing his hair with kelp fingers. Another vanishes entirely, leaving only a salt-crusted coat and a journal full of questions no one can bear to read. Fear cannot hold. Not anymore, because it isn't just Badr who's changing. It's you, too. You who have watched, who have listened, who have followed this thread through ink and silence and sea murmur. You've seen things no one else remembers. You've felt the shape of forgotten cities. You've tasted starlight in your dreams. And now, you understand, the story isn't something being told to you. It's something you are becoming. Sleep now. Let the tide carry you a little further. The next part awaits. You sleep. And in sleeping, you sink, softly, soundlessly, into the deeper layers where memory becomes sediment and dreams harden into fossils. Here, in the marrow of night, you are not bound by time or tide or skin. You become what Badr became, what Julnar became. You become possible. When you wake, it is not with a jolt, but with a hush, like a curtain drawn slowly open. The city is not the same, nor are you. The sky is darker, but not with storm. It has turned a deep, velvet blue that breathes like a creature asleep. The stars are in different places, not scattered, but arranged. Like letters in an alphabet no one has spoken in millennia, the palace has changed its shape again. No longer a place of symmetry and marble. It coils like a shell around its core, rooms folding into rooms, stairs looping like nautilus spirals, mirrors winking with other people's reflections. The doors do not always lead where they did yesterday, but the guards have stopped questioning it. They know, now, that the palace listens, that it wants something, and in its center, Badr listens too. He sits before the breathing stone, not every night, but often. And when he does, the city holds its breath. Cats gather on rooftops. Bells hum without being touched. Ink runs from scrolls and dances in circles before settling into new, secret script. The bridge has begun to form, not of brick, not of wood, but of understanding. Each night, more people remember the sea, not as something they've seen, but something they've been. A fisherman recalls a song his grandmother sang that bends the wind. A baker discovers that her sourdough sings lullabies if left alone at dusk. Children play in fountains and emerge dripping truths instead of water. And beneath the city, Julnar moves through the aqueducts, her body more fluid than flesh now, trailing scales and salt. She appears when needed, never before, never late. She is changing too. Once, she was the last of her kind. Now she is the first of something else. She leaves behind gifts, a fishbone comb that untangles nightmares, a pearl that glows when you lie, a single silver whisker that grants perfect memory of your happiest moment. These are not random trinkets. They are promises. The mouth below watches, She does not speak again. Not yet. But sometimes the drains murmur her lullabies. Sometimes the fountains spill seawater even on dry days. And sometimes, when people fall asleep near open windows, they dream of her gaze. Wide, endless, filled with the weight of everything ever lost. You dream of her too, but you do not fear her, because something inside you, something deep and tidal, remembers her. The gates are opening, one by one. First in the city, a cracked sewer line spills ink instead of waste. A crack in the marketplace reveals an ancient stair descending into glowing silt. A temple door opens to reveal nothing but open ocean, visible through stone as if the building were only skin. Then, in the world beyond, a poet in a desert city dreams of waves and wakes with gills. A mountain village finds its wells filled with salt and the bones of unfamiliar fish. A boy in a distant monastery hums a melody that causes the stone beneath his feet to ripple like water. The change is spreading, and with it, the questions. What was sealed? Why now? Who is the bridge for? The salt circle no longer meets. Their members scatter. Some go mad, others vanish. A few write warnings in blood on walls that no one else can see. But Badr walks the city still, slower now. He pauses more often to listen, not to the stone, but to the city itself, its heartbeat, its breath, its bones. One night, he returns to the room where it all began. The cell, empty now. The walls are clean, the bar's gone, but the air remembers. So does the floor, which still carries the faintest outline of where the mirror once lay. He kneels, not to pray, but to plant something. Just a seed, small, silver. It sinks into the stone as if it belongs there, and the ground warms beneath his touch. You understand? Now, not with your mind, but with your marrow. This is not a story of punishment. It is not even a story of redemption. It is a story of return, of what was buried learning how to rise again, slowly, kindly, with intent. Not to conquer, not to consume, but to connect. Because the mouth below is not a monster. She is a memory of what we once were, of what we may become. And you, yes, you, are the echo that carries her voice forward. You've walked with Badr. You've watched Julnar shimmer through tunnels of thought. You've let the dreams soak through your sleep like seawater through cloth. Now let it settle in you. Let it bloom. Let it change you. And rest, just for a little while longer. The tide hasn't reached its highest point yet, but it will, and when it does, you'll know. You'll be ready. Sleep, little bridge. Sleep and hold